At 73 years old, Mick Mars shocked the world when he finally spoke out about what really happened between him and Mötley Crüe. The man who helped shape the band's sound for over 4 decades suddenly became the center of controversy. From being cut out of profits to being quietly pushed aside, Mick's story isn't just about fame and music, it's about loyalty, pain, and survival. Mick Mars was born Robert Allen Deal in 1951 in Terre Haute, Indiana. He didn't grow up rich or famous. His family struggled financially, but even as a teenager, he was obsessed with music. For nearly 20 years, Mick played in small, unknown bands across California. He failed again and again, moving from one group to another. But every failure made him tougher. That hard-earned grit became part of his identity, the dark, powerful edge that would later define Mötley Crüe's sound. In 1981, everything changed. Mick helped form Mötley Crüe, and from day one, his influence was undeniable. While the others, Nikki Sixx, Tommy Lee, and Vince Neil, became known for their wild lifestyles and shocking behavior, Mick focused on what mattered most, the music. He was the one who suggested the band's name after hearing someone describe them as a motley-looking crew. That one moment set the tone for everything that followed. But Mick wasn't like the rest. He wasn't chasing fame or chaos. He was serious, disciplined, and dedicated to his craft. While the others partied, he spent hours fine-tuning guitar riffs and studying sound. His love for traditional blues and hard rock gave the band its heavy, distinctive style. Songs like Kickstart My Heart, Girls, 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 and Dr. Feelgood were built on the deep, growling riffs that came from Mick's hands. People who worked with him say he was always the first to show up and the last to leave the studio. He kept notebooks full of details about every song and solo he played. What makes this even more remarkable is that Mick did all of this while living with a painful, degenerative bone disease. When he was just 17, Mick was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, a chronic condition that causes the bones in the spine to fuse together. Over time, it limits movement and causes constant pain. He had spinal surgery in 2004, metal rods inserted to help him stand, and lived every day with pain most people can't imagine. But he never complained. He never asked for pity. For more than 40 years, he kept playing, recording, and performing live, pushing through the pain because music was his life. Unlike his bandmates, Mick rarely made headlines for scandals. He wasn't into drugs or wild fights. He stayed quiet, avoided drama, and let his guitar do the talking. Fans noticed. On rock forums and fan pages, he's often called the soul of Mötley Crüe. Many believe that without him, the band wouldn't have had its signature sound. Behind the fame, though, was a story of quiet endurance. Mick's health was getting worse, and touring became harder. On October 26, 2022, he announced he would stop touring with Mötley Crüe, saying his health no longer allowed him to keep up with the demanding schedule. But he made one thing clear: he was stepping back from live shows, not quitting the band. He still considered himself an official member, with all rights and shares intact. At first, fans were supportive and understanding. But things quickly took a turn. The band released their own statement saying they had found a new guitarist, John Five, who had played with Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson. What caught people's attention was how they worded it. There was no mention of Mick still being part of the band. His name and image started disappearing from tour materials and social media posts. It looked like Mötley Crüe had moved on, without him. Fans were confused and angry. After all, this was a man who had been there from the very beginning. Some insiders even claimed that replacing Mick had been planned for months, maybe even years. Mick himself stayed silent, but he was deeply hurt. He hadn't agreed to be pushed out. Behind the scenes, he started consulting lawyers, preparing to fight for his rights. In early 2023, the truth came out. Mick Mars filed a lawsuit against Mötley Crüe in Los Angeles County Superior Court. In the documents, he accused his bandmates of cutting him out of profits and making changes to financial agreements without his approval. He claimed that his share of the band, 25%, was unfairly reduced to 5% without any legal agreement or his signature. According to Mick, they were trying to erase him from the group he helped create. But that wasn't all. The lawsuit included shocking claims about how the band had been performing. Mick said that during recent tours, much of what fans heard wasn't live. He accused Vince Neil of lip-syncing and Tommy Lee of using pre-recorded drum loops. Mick insisted he was the only one still playing live on stage. Instead of being appreciated for his effort, he said he was criticized for sounding different. The band fired back quickly. Their lawyer claimed Mick couldn't play properly anymore and was slowing them down. Nikki Sixx posted on social media saying Mick was forgetting songs and couldn't keep up. But many fans didn't buy it. They believed the band was turning on the one man who had always stayed true to the music. Music journalists began to dig deeper. Reports from Loudwire and Variety suggested that this wasn't just a disagreement, it was about control and money. Mick still technically owned part of the Mötley Crüe name, and that gave him legal power over how it could be used. His lawsuit demanded that the band stop using the name until things were resolved. Promoters and sponsors began watching closely, worried about how this legal battle could affect future tours. By 2024, the case still hadn't been settled, but the damage was already done. The band's image took a major hit, while Mick Mars was being praised for standing his ground. After decades of silence, the quietest member of Mötley Crüe had finally found his voice. And instead of spending his time fighting online, Mick did something unexpected. He went back to what he loved most, making music. In February 2024, while the legal fight was still going on, he released his first solo album, The Other Side of Mars. It was his first ever project without the band's name attached, and it was powerful. 10 songs filled with emotion, anger, and truth. The album had a darker, heavier sound that mixed hard rock, grunge, and industrial elements. Mick worked with legendary producer Michael Wagoner, known for his work with Metallica and Ozzy Osbourne, to make sure every note was perfect. He teamed up with respected musicians like Paul Taylor, Ray Luzier, and Jacob Bunton. From the very first song, Loyal to the Lie, fans could tell this was something different. It was raw, honest, and personal. Critics loved it. Kerrang! Called it his most authentic work yet. Loudwire said Mick had managed to stay true to his roots while creating something entirely new. The lyrics told a story of betrayal and resilience. It was clear that many of the songs were inspired by what he had gone through with the band. In one interview, Mick said, "I don't need to make statements. I let my guitar speak for me." That line became a symbol of his quiet strength. The Other Side of Mars debuted at number 5 on the iTunes rock chart and reached the Billboard Top 20 for rock albums. Fans loved it, not just because it was great music, but because it felt real. Many people saw it as Mick's comeback, his way of reclaiming control after being pushed aside. Despite the success, Mick announced he wouldn't be touring. His health still limited what he could physically do, but he planned to release more music and a documentary about the making of the album. He even confirmed that a second album was already in the works, with a different, more electronic sound. Mick said he wanted to keep experimenting and growing, free from anyone else's control. To him, The Other Side of Mars wasn't just an album. It was a statement. Proof that he didn't need Mötley Crüe to stay relevant. He was his own artist now. While most musicians his age retire or try to relive old glory days, Mick chose to move forward and evolve. By 2024 and early 2025, he began giving more interviews. Once a private and quiet man, he started speaking openly about what happened. In a Rolling Stone cover story, he said, "I was drained like a broken machine and then thrown away. That's not how brothers treat each other." Despite the pain, there was no bitterness in his words. When asked if he'd ever play with Mötley Crüe again, he didn't say no, but he made it clear that it would only happen for the music, not for fame or money. Today, Mick Mars lives a quieter life in Nashville. He spends most of his days working in his home studio, doing physical therapy, and writing new music. Even though he doesn't perform live anymore, he still practices guitar every day. Music isn't just his career, it's his therapy. Younger bands often cite Mick as a major influence. At major festivals like Hellfest and Aftershock, his name is often mentioned with respect. Online, guitarists study his solos and tone, analyzing how he created that dark, gritty sound that became the foundation of 80s metal. There's now talk among music journalists about nominating him for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not just as a member of Mötley Crüe, but as a solo artist. Over 50 years after he first picked up a guitar, Mick Mars is finally getting the recognition he deserves. When asked recently how it feels to finally tell his story, Mick said something simple but powerful: "I didn't speak to win. I spoke to stay true to myself." As of now, negotiations between Mick Mars and Mötley Crüe are still ongoing, with no public resolution yet. But one thing is certain: Mick Mars has moved on. He's not chasing headlines or revenge. He's focused on creating, on expressing himself honestly, and on proving that authenticity lasts longer than fame. At 73, Mick Mars is still standing, still playing, and still inspiring. He may no longer share the stage with his old band, but his spirit, his sound, and his story will always be part of rock history. What do you think about Mick Mars' journey and everything he's revealed? Let us know in the comments, and if you love real rock stories, don't forget to subscribe for more.